things started to slow down at all?
No, people keep asking if things have settled down. I said no, they're stable. So I think, it's been really good to get on the other side of signing day. I think it's just, you've still got a bunch of assistant coaches that are, we're in transition. Half the families aren't here and all that. So all that stuff's just kind of going to run through the spring till everybody can be truly settled. But it is good to get on the other side of the February signing day. All our coaches are hired. Everyone's here. Majority of our staff is hired, even our support staff. We may have one or two more positions in our recruiting department that we'll get probably hired here in the next week. And once we do that, we'll get all that information out once everything's formal there. But just to be back around our players is good. To have some sense of normalcy in that, like, starting this week, our staffs on offense and defense have been starting to do installs with the staffs to start getting ready to install with the players for spring ball. And I think we've got about a 7-week winter program leading up to spring ball, and they're through 3 weeks of that already with Sean Griswold and his staff. And so that part is kind of off the ground. Kids are back in school. So while the first 2 months were pretty hectic and just not maybe normal, I think we are kind of getting at least into a routine a little bit, which is nice.
You mentioned signing day, and given when you and your staff arrived, how much of your approach to signing day was simply finding the best players available as opposed to quickly trying to evaluate what talent you had left over and trying to fill specific needs?
It's a great question. I mean, when you kind of come into a new position, a new job, you don't really know, you don't have the relationships with even the guys committed. So you kind of look at, okay, who's committed and then how many opportunities or how many options and spots do we have left. And so, the last thing you want to do is just react quickly just to do something, and it maybe not be in the best interest of yourself, even that student athlete long term. So we tried to get the right guys. I think we ended up signing 12 high school student athletes, 8 in December, 4 here in February. We were, of the 25, we didn't have 11 to even work with because they had been just used in other ways by the previous staff. And so we didn't have a full allotment, so we felt like what are our needs? We felt like we had some needs in the secondary, some needs on the D-line and at linebacker, some needs at receiver. We've lost 3 really productive guys in Danny Gray, Reggie Roberson, and Grant Calcaterra. That's a lot of production on offense walking out the door, and 3 senior offensive linemen as well. So those were the positions we felt of need that we wanted to address, but we also wanted to make sure we got the right guys. So of those 12, I think 10 of them for the state of Texas, 8 from the Metroplex. We've got 4 other mid-year enrollees that were transfers, 2 linebackers, a tight end, and a wideout, so we felt like it addressed those needs. And of those guys, 3 of the 4 are from Texas, 2 from the Metroplex. So they fit the needs, and again, by not reaching in some areas, we've still got 5 positions because they allow you with the potential for a +7 this year to try to make up for this transfer world we're all working with. We've still got 5 initial slots left that we can take our time with through the spring, going into the summer to try to get the right fits for those spots. So that's kind of how we approached it.
Obviously, Dallas is an emphasis here in recruiting, and so is Texas. But how much are you going to try and tap into the relationships you made in Florida with the couple of years you were there, in addition with obviously the guys you brought in back there?
It's a great question. I mean, in recruiting, it's all about relationships anyways, whether it's local or not. So, whether it's myself or somebody on our staff, if we have a relationship anywhere and it fits, we'll explore that, and we'll use those relationships to get the right people here. I mean, we did sign a kicker from Alabama that was a previous relationship with Craig Niver. Otherwise, we're probably not going to Prattville, Alabama, even though I spent 6 years in Alabama, And so we'll do those things when we need to. But the reality of it is, we're blessed to be here in Dallas, where honestly the Metroplex is like our home state, and then the rest of Texas is our secondary. We got the whole state. You don't have to leave, and I think we've got the right kind of players, the right kind of student athletes, and even in the transfer world, a lot of the people that come back to us are from the state of Texas or the Metroplex. So, we want to be efficient. We want to be smart with where we spend our time and resources, and I think that's part of being at SMU and in Dallas. We don't have to go far to do that, but we'll never say never if it's the right fit.
Brett, go back to something you were talking about earlier about the time crunch of evaluating guys when you first get this job. And you've obviously, I know you've recruited here before, but you spent the last few years in a totally another part of the country. How does that evaluation process with current commits go? Because their seasons have already been over. It's harder to get an in-person evaluation at that point. Obviously, you're trying to put together staff as well. So how does that process work when you're getting an evaluation of currently committed guys you maybe necessarily haven't seen?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge really whenever you take a new job. But to your point, the last 2 years I hadn't been in this region. I've been in South Florida, and South Florida, much like here, you didn't have to go further than South Florida, maybe South Georgia for your players. And so I hadn't been in the Dallas, the Texas area recruiting over the last 2 years. And so when you start looking at the class of 2022, which was most current, or even 23s, you're not as up to speed as you would have been. And so, like I said, did the best we could. When I got the job the first day, meet the team, do a couple other things, meet with some players, get in my office, and it's like, well, the first thing you do on the first day, let's call the guys who are committed. Well, there was nobody here. So it's like, well, I guess I'll Google who's committed to SMU. That's no lie. And, oh, these are the 10 guys, And so you reach out to them and you start to get to know them. And in that case, I hadn't had those relationships for 2 years. I had better relationships with guys on our roster who had played here. And so that's always a challenge. But it's what we do as coaches. And I think, now we got through the 22 cycle, and that's another reason you don't want to make mistakes. You want to take the right people that want to be here, that fit, but don't reach. And now we're into the 23 and 24 cycle, which, again, most of us hadn't been here in the last year and a half. So there's a little catch up there, but we have time to do it now. So that's kind of what we're working on now.
And now, obviously, going from an assistant to head coach, when spring evaluation comes up, your sisters will be out on the road, but you won't be able to just because that's the nature of it. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that, and would you like to see a scenario down the road where head coaches are back on the road this spring?
Well, it's probably going to be an incomplete answer because I haven't gone through it yet on this side of things. It is going to be weird. I mean, for the last 12 years or so, I've been going out in the springs with the exception of the COVID windows, and so I'm not going to be able to do that. But just already being on this side of it for a couple months, I know there's going to be a lot of things in April and May that I am doing. To me, I think there's nothing broken with the model we have right now. Who knows, after a spring, I may be mad that I didn't get to go out, and I may tell you something differently. But I think, I've hired 10 guys that are going to go out recruiting, 10 coaches that I trust, I think are really, really good. And I think that's what you want to do. You want to hire people that make your team better, make you better, your staff better, hopefully are better than you. And I think that we've got that. So those guys are going to go out and do a great job and allow me to do some of those head coach things that have to be done. And so to me, without going through it, I don't see any reason to start changing things.
Is there anything different about this place that you've noticed over the last 2 months compared to when you were previously here? I think this building
This building was here, yeah.
First,
My last year here, we had the Armstrong Field House, and we had this recruiting area. So, there's not a lot that's different, and I mean that in a good way. Like I said, I've said before, I think what the last 4 years, I think what Sonny did has been great for SMU and great for this program. And I think Chad before him and June before him, everyone has made this place a little better over the last several coaching cycles, and it's put me in a position to be in a good situation to hopefully take the next step with the program. But I was fortunate to be here when we started doing the Born and Raised and the Pony Up Dallas and embracing the city and the mayor embracing us and all those things that campus and football have done. I was fortunate enough to be here when we moved into this facility. A lot of the relationships in the high school ranks have stayed the same. A lot of the relationships on campus have stayed the same. I think the things that have changed is, one, I think we have even more momentum, and we're even probably in a better position to try to maybe build on the foundation that has been set. My last year here, we won 10 games. Then the COVID year, I think they won 7. This past year, 8. So 3 years of consistent winning is better than 1. And so I think that's probably one thing, is that we have a locker room of guys that believe we can win. They're used to winning. They are starting to expect to win because learning to win, it's a habit, and it takes some time to do that. And so I think in 2019 we kind of broke through. The last 2 years have been winning seasons, and so that's a good thing. It's a big thing. But when it starts coming to maybe competing for that next step, we haven't gotten there yet. But I think that's different. I think the second thing is different is we just got a $50 million donation, and we got a $100 million football ops building coming, in the near future, and that's different. I mean, that's a game changer. That gives us something, with what Gary Weber did with that gift, and what really the alignment, I think, is in a good place from President Turner all the way down to Rick Hart and into football, and really all the supporters of SMU football is fully aligned with, competing at the highest level. And that football ops facility and the way it's going to transform Ford Stadium and really just the ability to recruit to that and the way it's going to transform the student-athlete experience here, I think is a game changer, and that's different. Those are probably the two main things.
You mentioned the guys that are leaving, the receivers and the 3 offensive linemen. Was there any effort by you and your staff when you looked at the larger group of guys who could go pro or grad school or transfer? Do you try to recruit any of those to stay?
I think most of the guys leaving, had to leave or were going to leave. You've got Reggie and Danny and Grant who were all going to the Senior Bowl, and if you're going to the Senior Bowl and the Combine, you need to go in most cases. Obviously, Reggie had a minor injury, didn't allow him to compete, and I think Danny when he got there. But still, having 3 guys in the Senior Bowl is a good thing. But those guys, that's the production leaving. And then, the offensive linemen, whether it was Bo Morris and Hayden Howerton, who played more football than anybody ever, right? And even at the time, Alon, who was going to go play in the NFLPA game and go pro, those guys leaving the door with a lot of experience. Jalen Thomas is probably the one who was going to leave, and he was 100% gone. But fortunately, I was here his freshman and sophomore year. We had a good talk. He met with Karen Justice one time and felt like he wanted to come back instead of being maybe a late round or a free agent guy. He thought, I can come back, compete. I think he felt good maybe with the familiarity of what's coming back and have a good 5th year, if you will, and maybe improve his draft stock. For the most part, those guys were kind of already settled. Now it was a lot of the younger guys in this transfer world that have opportunities, and a lot of people wanted them, and I think everybody that we wanted to stay has stayed, and I think that just says a lot about SMU, about the program here and the trajectory we're on, and them wanting to be here.
Obviously, it's early, but one of the storylines is going to be in spring or in fall or spring camp is going to be quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Preston Stone from his recruiting days, and obviously Tanner Morgan had a big season last year. How have you communicated what a potential quarterback battle might look like to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think starting with our whole roster, competition is going to be a big thing for us. That's one of the foundations we want our program to be built on, because competition makes everybody better. I mean, you and I wake up every morning, we're competing at a bare minimum with ourselves, and so competition is part of life, and learning how to win, learning how to fail, but to continue to compete is part of it. It makes everybody better, and especially at the quarterback position, if you're scared of competition, then it's probably not going to be the position for you long term. We feel very fortunate to have 2 really good quarterbacks on our roster that want to be here. You look at Tanner, and he had a fantastic season, and so you look at a veteran guy with the experience that should have, you would think a leg up, and just the fact that he's the returning guy who started last year. And then you got someone like Preston, who by all accounts had an incredible freshman season in practice and fall camp and all those things. I know the teammates believe in him, and he's deserved the right to compete too. So I think when you have a new staff coming in, it gives everybody a brand new start. Everybody's going to compete, and those 2 are no different. And look, we wouldn't be good coaches and doing our job if we didn't play the best guys. So that's the great thing about our sport. That's the great thing about competition. We'll go out and we'll have 15 spring practices. We'll have the summer. We'll have fall camp, and they're going to decide, who those guys are. But we feel very fortunate. There's a lot of people around the country who don't have one. We feel like we have 2 really good quarterbacks that we could win with. But they're going to get all the attention, but it's kind of going to be that way at every position through the spring at a minimum, and that's how we're going to approach it.
I want to ask you a little bit about your recruiting department, personal staff. You hired Alex Brown over from Rice. Curious, how did you get to know him, and what drew you to him, and also what do you want your personnel department to look like in 2022?
Yeah.
2023?
I think that's probably something we're going to do a little different maybe here than was being done, and we're going to have probably more of our resources devoted to that recruiting department. And, we hired Bobby and Alex Brown, the Brown brothers we call them, and they're not related, and they didn't even know each other. But Bobby comes from Air Force, and before that North Carolina, and he's going to be the director of our recruiting operations. He's going to oversee the entire recruiting operation, which is a big deal at the collegiate level. And then hired Alex Brown to be our director of scouting, kind of player personnel. And I think those 2 guys really, I think their strengths complement each other. They're going to work well together. Then underneath that, we've got a few more positions. We're going to hire someone to be our director of on-campus recruiting and experience there. And we're going to hire someone to be our director of creative media. I would think all that would happen soon to try to finish out that kind of department over there. We've also, kept people like Scott Natty, and we've got a couple other hires that will get announced soon to help us also in the recruiting wing of our of our program, especially in more of the Dallas area, guys that fit that. And so it's a team effort, but we're definitely going to make sure that we do everything we can, to compete at the highest level in recruiting as well, because that's the lifeblood of your program. But back to your original question, I thought, I actually, believe it or not, was going to hire one guy. I interviewed Bobby and Alex, and was interviewing them for one position. And I thought they were both so exceptional, I just hired both of them. And, it's like, well, I can't make a decision. Well, they're both really good, and they're both really good in different ways. Is there a way these guys can work together? And after talking to both of them, saying, this is how I see you, and this is how I see you, and how I see you fitting, and they both were like, I think you nailed it. And so I feel like we had a home run with both those guys.
Where do you feel like the more resource, I guess, I've seen, director of scouting, for instance, the title, like, I don't think was maybe a thing 20 years ago. I mean, it was every coach obviously did their own evaluations, but I feel like that part of a personnel department has grown in recent years. I guess, why is that? And I guess, how do you view the importance of just that part of it, the evaluation part, when it comes to building your department?
Well, I think the identification and initial evaluation is huge. And you look at what all the 10 coaches and myself have to do on top of just recruiting and evaluating. There has to be a screening process to get, just take the state of Texas, for example. That is a large endeavor every year, but you're not just recruiting the upcoming 23 class, but you got 24, you got 25. Now you've got the transfer market. That's a whole nother wing. It's almost like you've got your high school is like your draft, and your transfer world is like your free agent world, and you've got to be able to manage both. You've got a walk-on program, you've got all those things. And so the director of scouting is the title we went with. It's player personnel, which has been around for a long time, but at the end of the day, those guys have to organize the entire recruiting department, organize the recruiting structure, the policies and procedures with just how we evaluate, how we track it, how we have our board set up, how we do all those things, our mail-outs and unofficial visits, official visits, game day. You could list 35, 40 things that are all really important to our recruiting department. And so I think that's where having Bobby and Alex with different strengths leading that group, I think will really help us. And then to your point on the resources, just having more people in that department to help. So we can be really efficient in all those things. And then as coaches, we're always recruiting too. I've told everybody already, and they already know this, and everybody in our building recruits. There's from Terry Gardner, my assistant, you walk in, she's in recruiting whether she likes it or not, and that's just the way it is. So some people do it a whole lot more than others, and some people are doing it when they don't know they're doing it, but everybody has a hand in that, and that's just the reality of it, because everything you do matters. But I think the biggest thing that's changed is you now have the transfer world, and so you can no longer just kind of have one avenue to get football players, and we didn't even talk about junior college, which is still out there. So I just think that's what's changed. There's so much more information now than there used to be.
You spoke a moment ago about how SMU may or may not have changed since you left. How are you different than when you left a few years ago?
That's a good question. You put me on the spot with that one. I don't know. I'm a little bit older. I'm definitely uglier. My kids are older. So, I don't know. I think every year, hopefully, you learn from your experiences. And I had great 2 years down at the University of Miami. I was fortunate to have someone like Derek King for a year and learned a lot from just him. You learn a lot from your players, too. And then this year, we had a lot of adversity this year at Miami, and for us to kind of pull out of that and finish the season the way we did, I thought I was really proud of our guys, and you learn a lot in all those situations. Everything's a learning experience. It kind of goes back to competing. Sometimes it goes the way you want, sometimes it doesn't, but you always learn from it. So I would like to think I'm 2 years wiser on the deal. I have a great appreciation for being here, though, for being in Dallas, for being at SMU after being away for 2 years. Like I said, hopefully, I've always equated it before, like, first time you get married or have kids, everybody's like, hey, are you ready for this? You're like, I don't know, I wasn't ready to have kids, but that's worked out okay. And we definitely wasn't ready to get married, and she hadn't ran off yet. So, feel like as prepared as I'm ever going to be, and, I'm just excited.
When it comes to the transfer portal, the guys you've added or will add have a lot of experience, but obviously SMU being in Dallas is kind of a unique thing where you can bring guys home that maybe didn't play at their respective schools. I guess when it comes to guys without experience that have gone elsewhere and they're in the transfer portal, what do you have to see from them, especially if there's no game tape in a year or 2 years?
Yeah, I think if you get an older kid with like 1 year left or two, you want him to have played,
Mhm.
you know, because then you get that experience, like we're going to get with a Shannon Reed or a Bo Corrales. When you go maybe someone younger like Cameron Allen or Jaquandis Burns, well, you either knew them in high school, so you were aware of their skill set then, someone on your staff knew them, you go back and watch their high school tape and go, well, we would have taken him then. You know, if you wouldn't have taken him then, probably would stop right there. And then you, honestly, we're all coaches, we talk. Once you're leaving the school, we'll call coaches at that school and say, tell me about it. You know, because at that point, he's leaving their school. And so you gather as much information you can, and now you're more projecting, because if you have 3 or 4 years, it's almost like taking a high school kid again, but maybe he's already had his redshirt year or whatnot. And so it could be because you need depth, because you do see the potential or maybe the fit in what we do as a system versus maybe where he was. There's a variety of things you try to judge. And so I think it's just depending on, when you take a guy with multiple years, especially 3 or more, it's almost like taking a high school kid to some degree, versus a guy with 1, maybe 2. You definitely want that experience. And that's kind of how we differentiate it. Again, you take a guy with 1 year, you want him to be able to make an immediate impact.
What did you see in Coach Grizz when you were looking at strength coach options and what made him the great fit here?
I think 2 things. I think 1, his experience. You're looking at a guy with 25 plus years of experience. I think 2, he really wanted to be here. You know, his wife's from East Texas. He's worked with people that I know in the past, like Gus Malzahn, Rob Likens, and I've never worked with Bronco Mendenhall, but Bronco, he wore me out about him. I mean, he couldn't have raved about Grizz anymore. And then just former players that he's had that I know over the years. You know, even a guy like Brendan Marion, who's now at Texas, played for him at Tulsa and is calling me going, man, Grizz is awesome, blah, blah, blah. So you just try to listen. But I think he wanted to be here, and I think at the end of the day, the experience. And I felt like we needed someone to come in here that has done it at the highest level and done it for a long time to give our guys the best chance in that program, because they spend a ton of time with him, as we know, and he's really, over the years, been really good at being able to relate to all the guys on the roster, and I think that's really, really important. He can connect with those guys.
And how does that help you address what you think you guys need to address going into the spring as far as the team goes, as far as, you know, their mindset or what you guys prioritize on the field?
How does what help now?
How does Coach Grizz, because, you know, most of those guys, like you said, are with them so much.
Yeah, well, it helps. It helps a lot. And like I said, just in the transition phase of a quick turnaround, him being able to hit the ground running, he already knew he wanted to be a part of the staff. I think he's brought some great guys in to be a part of his strength staff. You'll talk to him about that more later. But in a 2 to 3 month cycle where there was a lot of new going on for our kids, a lot of things that I'm having to deal with, just having a stable guy to come in that walks right in day one and knows exactly how to run a program, knows how to relate to the guys, I think is key for us being able to make this transition quickly. Before we move on, I know she's about to shut it down. A couple things I want to say. So I did allude to, we've got a 7-week winter program going right now. We're going to start spring ball March 4th. We're going to probably end it April 8th. We'll get you the specific dates in between there that we'll be practicing. You know, a lot of our practices are in the morning, except on maybe Fridays or Saturdays. Those could be more evening or midday. But we'll get those dates out soon. But we're going to start a little sooner maybe than some do. And then I think the other thing too, it's important, is you're going to get to meet the staff here in a minute. And I'm excited about those 10 men plus Grizz that you're going to talk to, because one, I think they're just a great fit here. I want to hire good people. You know, I think for us to win, we have to have a connected team. Well, for us to have a connected team, we have to have a connected staff. We have to have staff that, in this day and age, they know how to win, they know how to compete, they're good at what they do, but they really genuinely care about the players that we have. And they can develop relationships with the players we have, because that's always been key in coaching, but more so now than ever with the portal and all those things, that's huge. But when you look at those guys, between the 10 of them plus Grizz, there's over 55 championships at the collegiate level, whether they're being as a player or as a coach. And so you start talking about, well, we want to have a championship mindset and a championship pedigree. To me, getting a bunch of guys who have been there and done that, I think is really important. And then the last thing I really want to say is congrats to Tim Jankovic and our men's basketball team last night for that big win against Houston. That atmosphere was incredible. The mob, the Moody Magic, all those things, that was awesome. My whole crew was there, and we got to see him storm the court. And then you got Toyelle up in Cincinnati winning, what she's doing, I think 5-2 with the women right now, second. To me, it's just a great time to be here at SMU. And so big congrats to those people. And then you start talking about SMU. I mean, we're at the game last night. We got the Dallas Mavericks there supporting us in the stands. You got President Bush and the former First Lady on the front row. I mean, that's why you want to come to Dallas. That's why you want to be at SMU. And what everyone saw at Moody last night, that's what we need Ford Field to be like in the fall. That atmosphere, our students were incredible, and so I'm looking forward to us taking that to the grass or the turf, if you will, come September. But just a big congrats to those two, men's and women's basketball, as they make their push for the tournament. I know our equestrians in a battle right now with TCU. They were leading the last I saw, so hopefully they'll pull that thing out as well. But